Hello everyone, and welcome to a new episode of Fit Till 30. As always, I am your host Tudor, and thank you for joining me each Wednesday to learn about cognitive biases and how to overcome them. For this week's topic, we have a multitude of examples to choose from, but let's start with the timeless classic, the beach body problem. Let's say it's early spring, you've just been through winter, staying indoors, not exercising, and eating a copious amount of food, especially for Christmas and New Year's, and you've put on a bit of weight. You think ahead to the summer, when you would like to go to the beach and feel comfortable in your own body. So you promise to yourself that you'll take better care of what you eat, and it would be totally doable since you have so much time left until the vacation. But the first meal that you eat after taking this pledge rolls around. Let's say it is a fancy restaurant and you try to be more careful with your choices, going for a light soup and a salad for the first two courses. But after these, the waiter comes and brings you the menu for the desserts. In it, you spot the chocolate cake, your favorite. And in a moment, you forgo all your initial promises and indulge in that sweet delicacy, only to shake your head in regret when you weigh yourself later, wondering how you could have caved in so soon after setting a goal, and once again vowing not to repeat this mistake, only for the cycle to repeat itself. You can also replace the chocolate cake with other cravings and addictions, such as sugar, caffeine, drugs, and the result will be the same in failing to give up something that we hold close and have developed a dependency towards. Alternatively, you might have received a bonus from your job and are thinking about how best to spend it. Rationally, you might deduce that diverting the money to some form of savings account or investment portfolio would be the better option for the future. However, now, in the present, you have a bunch of no-strings-attached cash on you that you will most likely end up spending on something more immediately satisfying, such as a weekend of partying with friends or some city break abroad. A favorite of mine, that I also fall prey to more times than I would like to admit, is the infamous procrastination when faced with a difficult task. Say you have a big project coming up, and you're fully aware of the deadline and the amount of time in which you realistically could accomplish said task. Yet time and time again, you defer starting on the task and procrastinate by spending your time doing fun activities, meal tasks around the house, or even other tasks that, while useful to accomplish, are not in any way related to the original project, only to end up crunching on it the day or night before the due date, feeling tired and miserable and cursing yourself for waiting so long to get started. Something of note, despite it being quite insidious when looked at closely, is the phenomenon of buy now, pay later. This concept is often apparent when applying for a software as a service, often abbreviated as SaaS, app such as Netflix. With these apps, whilst they obviously rely on a monthly subscription in order to generate revenue, they will always offer what they claim is a free 1-month trial. On the one hand, that sounds great, since you as the consumer can test the product for 1 month, and if you like it, you can continue with the subscription or cancel it before the month ends. But here is where the insidiousness appears, as it is meant as more of a lure, making end users unconsciously believe that the product is free since there is no upfront payment, only a credit card verification. And once the month end rolls in and the automatic withdrawal of the subscription cost is processed, you'll most likely not even notice the money is missing. After all, money automatically changing hands digitally doesn't have the same visceral feeling as paying the same amount in cash manually each month, as the latter case would often lead you to think if the subscription was worth it, often increasing the likelihood of canceling said contract as a result. This same buy now, pay later mentality also applies to credit cards, already well known to encourage consumption beyond one's financial means, where again this feeling of getting things for free, even if the money used is not yours, powers this spiral into endless debt that many find hard to escape later down the line when all the overdue repayment fees start to pile up. Last but not least, the most quantifiable example of what I've shown above is a series of experiments that asked participants a set of 2 questions. The first sounded like this: if you could choose between receiving $100 now or $110 in a week, what would you choose? Now think about this question and answer it for yourself, but do try to say it out loud or write it down, as otherwise your brain will be tempted to change its answer once you hear the responses. The second question was, if you could choose between receiving $100 in a year or $110 in a year and a week, what would you choose? Same as before, think about the question and say or write down your answer for posterity. Now I will tell you the most common answers for the questions. For the first one, $100 was the most chosen variant for the first question, whereas $110 was the most common option for the second one. Let's look a bit at what the questions entail and are leading towards. First off, both questions offer a larger reward if the participant is willing to wait 1 extra week. In both cases, $10 extra. Now, of course, the rational decision would be to wait the extra week to receive a larger sum of money. Evidence in the fact most respondents to the second question chose to wait, hence delaying their gratification. However, when faced with the opportunity of instant gratification, receiving a smaller but immediate reward, the temptation is simply too strong to resist for most of us. This tendency to favor the more immediate option instead of the more favorable delayed one is called hyperbolic discounting. Discounting comes from the fact we discount the delayed outcome, making the instant outcome look more desirable by comparison. Hyperbolic comes from the fact that the delay has a much bigger impact the closer it is to the present, and the lesser one if it impacts the outcome later, making this discounting effect look like a hyperbolic curve when represented on a graph. A great example of this hyperbolic nature is the one I just gave about choosing between 2 sums of money. Even though the delay in both questions was 1 week, the fact one occurred from now and the other in a year's time made all the difference in how rationally people approach the situation. Now you might ask why we have this feature built in, so to speak. After all, rationality should be a default mindset for us. Well, this harkens back to the times where we weren't as exposed to these kinds of decisions, where pre-agriculture us would depend mostly on hunting animals and collecting plants to survive. This modus operandi doesn't really lend itself to making rational decisions about waiting for a better outcome, as each day could be the last and any resources collected in the now were far more valuable than any future maybes. After all, that is why we have the saying, a bird in the hand is worth 2 in the bush, which again exemplifies how we discount this future reward due to the certainty of the present. Of course, like any other cognitive bias, this one can also be overcome with some active mental effort. The first one is something we touched upon in episode 7, namely the empathy gap. As we think our future self will be more productive and efficient than us, we choose to do the fun things now and delay the work to later. As discussed there, the solution is to try to resonate with your future self and be honest about their actual capabilities. If you know you have a deadline soon and you will be busy in the future with another project, start now on that urgent task to avoid giving future you too much on his plate. Another helpful tip would be to apply the buy now, pay later tactic to your advantage. Just like you may be tricked into a monthly subscription you don't really need because you don't feel the money being spent, similarly, you can make good money saving decisions by choosing automatic monthly transfers to a savings account. This way, you only have to decide once to save money, the process being automated for the following months, and you won't feel the money missing in most cases. You don't have to start with a large amount of money from the get-go. You can begin small and see how well it goes and increase your contribution later as well. The third advice is to make your goals less chunky and more granular, so you can feel the rewards faster and more often and not fall prey to temptations that feel more immediate. For example, I have set a lofty goal for myself of losing around 40 kilograms in a year. And if I left it just at that, it would be very easy to overindulge in unhealthy food, as it would be hard for me to see myself and how I would look a year from now and reject the tasty dessert that is sitting in front of me right now. Because of this, I have split my goal into manageable chunks by focusing instead on each weekly weigh-in and seeing if I am losing about 1% of my total body weight each time. This means that when I am exposed to distractions of the food kind, I can think how it will impact my next scale check and make it easier to decide not to pursue it. Hope you now see what your answers to the initial questions mean, and that now you're also more aware of what made your goals and aspirations seem sometimes thwarted by your own supposedly rational brain. After all, the main point and somewhat harsh truth is that our brains are simply not built to be 100% rational all the time, as the world simply contains too many stimuli for us to be able to process them all in a methodical manner. This is why mental shortcuts such as hyperbolic discounting emerge to pick up the slack when we are flooded with choices. Moving on to my weekly progress, as discussed in the last episode, I am still on holiday, so the next episode will be the first weigh-in 3 weeks. Pretty excited to see what it will reveal about this experiment I've been trying during the vacation. I have had only 2 meals per day during this time, a light breakfast at the accommodation and a full meal at the restaurant, relying on the fact there is only so much I could eat in a single large meal. Next week will tell if this paid off. I've also been active every day, crushing my daily steps goal, so I can really say this was a great retreat all in all. To conclude, thank you for listening to this week's episode. I hope you found hyperbolic discounting a great way to pinpoint many of the issues you've been facing with regards to instant versus delayed gratification. As always, if you want to leave feedback on today's episode, you can find the email address in the episode description. There you'll also find the links to the podcast Twitter and Facebook, which you can follow to find out when the newest episode is released, as well as the show's subreddit where you can discuss with others your opinions on the subject. Hope you all have a lovely week, and I'll see you next time. Cheers.